Panelists who are joining us. I'll be joined by Baijayant Panda, Panda of the BJP, and Pavan Varma, who's a former diplomat and now an independent political analyst, for our political face-off on how the Israel-Hamas conflict has split wide open India's political class. All right, so the Israel-Hamas conflict is having political divisions here in India as well. The Prime Minister, of course, one of the first world leaders to come out and unequivocally, without any qualifications, condemn the terror attacks carried out by Hamas and say very, very clearly and unequivocally that we're standing with the people of Israel and the victims of terrorism. But the Congress Working Committee, which met yesterday, went back to the old Indian statement of trying to balance the alignments and the politics of that region by saying that while the terrorist acts are condemnable, the Palestinian people also have the right to self-determination. So how has this sort of split wide open the polity of India between the two major national parties? Let me now go across to two very articulate political spokespersons. I'm now joined by Baijayant Panda, spokesperson of the BJP and also National Vice President. And I'm also joined by Pavan Varma, who's now an independent political analyst and former diplomat, and of course, whose political views are very strong and sharp. But let me start with you, Jai Panda. Mr. Modi was one of the first world leaders to come out and very categorically, unequivocally stand by the people of Israel, stand by the government of Israel and the victims of terrorism. Are we now taking a qualitatively different approach, given the pictures that we saw, to all our shock and disbelief about how women and children and elderly people were being targeted by the Hamas terrorist attacks that we saw on Saturday?
Under Prime Minister Modi, India has been very clear that terrorism must be made to pay, otherwise they will keep at it. Of course, India has always had a policy against terrorism, but as you have pointed out, certain political elements in India are hedging their bets and waffling about it, but we really should not be. And the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear that there is zero tolerance for terrorism. And you know, when we saw the horrific events of last Saturday, it reminded me of what we experienced, especially during 26/11, and on a larger scale. You saw these terrorists come in, and with what depravity and cruelty they treated the elderly, they treated young children, killed people wantonly, paraded around the naked bodies of women, and were dragging off people who were bloodied as hostages. That was just awful to watch, and especially as Indians, especially having experienced decades of terror, cross-border terror, exactly what Israel experienced this last weekend, and especially having experienced almost an identical situation in 26/11, we should be extremely sympathetic and have empathy for Israel. So the Prime Minister was standing up for India's policy. The Prime Minister was standing up for our stated stand of zero tolerance against terror, and for the fact that Israel has the right to defend itself, just like we did.
So, Pavan Varma, you know, for 50 years, and I'm sure in your service as a diplomat, you must have seen this whole business of equanimity. While on the one side we say, yes, Israel's rights need to be recognized, but at the same time, the rights of the Palestinian people cannot be ignored. And the Congress Working Committee did a bit of that balancing act again yesterday with the statement that it put out. But do you believe that the events of Saturday and as Jai Panda said, the brutality of those attacks and the fact that it was carried on civilians, not on security forces, does that fundamentally and qualitatively change the way the world should respond, and also how India should respond, because we too have been victims of the same kind of terrorism?
Thank you, Zaka, and good evening, Jay. You know, I don't believe any political party in India can be ambivalent or uncertain about emphatic condemnation of the manner in which Hamas carried out its terrorist attack. It was brutal, it was inhuman, it shocked the conscience of the world, and therefore I have no hesitation in emphatically condemning it, and of the rights of Israel to take the necessary steps to avenge it, like any country would do. that is my position as far as terrorism and Hamas is concerned. However, I do believe that there are two unfinished problems in this world. One is the unfinished project of the architecture of security in Europe after the Berlin Walls fell down. The whole dynamics of the relationship between NATO and Russia, promises made, unkept, now the Russian-Ukrainian war, would require a new architect of security to prevent repeated occurrences of war. The other and much longer festering problem is the unsettled aspect of Israeli-Palestinian relations. The terror attack cannot be condoned. But I think the global powers should bear in mind that either the retaliation or state-sponsored expansion and aggression of Israel and the guerrilla tactics, terrorist tactics on the Palestinian side, if you want to put an end to them, you need to have a just and enduring peace which recognizes both the existence of the state of Israel and also the homeland of the Palestinians. And that was indeed the spirit. In 1967, if I'll just take half a minute more, in 1967, if you remember the war, the United Nations in its Resolution 242 called for the establishment of a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. And one of the first conditions to ensure that was the withdrawal of Israel from the territories occupied during the conflict. Now, that has not happened, and since then we have a situation where radical elements on both sides have indulged in activities. In the case of Israel, bombing of civilian areas. In the case of Hamas, this absolutely atrocious events that we saw. So we need actually for this, while having no sympathy for Hamas, to have a more enduring peace.